Did you know the British government once ran a secret propaganda unit so effective that it forged entire newspapers, invented fake communist defectors, and planted lies so convincing that even Allied intelligence agencies couldn't tell they were fabricated? The kicker is who was running it, not seasoned spy masters, but a ragtag crew of misfits, journalists, and ad men recruited specifically because they knew how to manipulate people. And there's a detail buried in this operation that changes everything about how we understand modern disinformation. What I found when I dug into this stopped me cold, because the playbook they wrote didn't stay in the Cold War. It's being used on you right now. This story is resurfacing because historian Rory Cormack has pulled back the curtain on Britain's Cold War black propaganda machine, and the timing couldn't be more relevant. According to History Extra, BBC, Cormack has pieced together the story of the mavericks who ran these operations. Names like Norman Reddaway, a Foreign Office Mandarin who orchestrated deception campaigns across 3 continents, and the shadowy Information Research Department, known internally as the IRD. These weren't rogue agents. They had government backing, diplomatic cover, and virtually zero oversight. The number that stopped me cold is coming up. To understand what the IRD actually did, you have to forget everything you think you know about British restraint. This wasn't stiff upper-lip diplomacy. This was knife fighting in the dark. The Information Research Department was created in 1948, officially to counter Soviet propaganda. Unofficially, it became one of the most prolific disinformation factories in the Western world. They didn't just respond to Soviet lies, they manufactured their own. The IRD planted stories in newspapers across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. They created front organizations that appeared to be independent think tanks or cultural groups, but were entirely controlled by British intelligence. They even produced forged documents designed to look like they'd been leaked from inside the Kremlin, seeding distrust among communist allies. And here's what that means for anyone alive today. The techniques they pioneered: astroturfing, narrative laundering, using credible-seeming third parties to spread state-crafted messages. These are the exact same techniques that show up in your social media feed every single day. The infrastructure of modern information warfare was beta-tested by British spies in the 1950s. By the way, if this kind of story is useful to you, hit like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. What I am about to show you is the part most people are missing. The deeper you go into the IRD's operations, the stranger it gets. Norman Reddaway and his colleagues didn't just target the Soviet Union. They targeted anyone who threatened British interests, including democratically elected leaders in former colonies. During the Indonesian confrontation of the 1960s, the IRD ran a full-scale black propaganda campaign against President Sukarno, fabricating stories about his personal life, his finances, his loyalty to his own people. They weaponized embarrassment. They didn't need to invade. They needed to make one man look untrustworthy, and they did it with typewriters, radio transmitters, and a network of compliant journalists who never asked where the stories came from. The victims here weren't just foreign leaders. They were ordinary people, Indonesian citizens, African voters, anyone whose understanding of reality was being quietly shaped by a government they'd never elected and didn't know existed. The villains weren't cartoonish. They were civil servants with Oxford degrees who genuinely believed They were saving the free world. And the people caught in the middle, every single person who read a newspaper in the developing world between 1948 and 1977, the year the IRD was finally shut down. Think about what that means for you personally. If your grandparents lived in a former British colony during those decades, the news they consumed may have been partially written by MI6. Stay with me. The last part is what actually matters. Here's where every remaining thread comes together. Remember I said there was a detail that changes everything? The IRD wasn't shut down because it failed. It was shut down because it succeeded too well and then turned its weapons inward. By the 1970s, elements of Britain's propaganda apparatus had begun targeting domestic audiences, planting stories in British newspapers to shape public opinion at home. The government was using against its own citizens the same machine it had built to fight communism abroad. That's the detail. The disinformation didn't stay foreign. It came home. Foreign Secretary David Owen finally dissolved the IRD in 1977, reportedly horrified by what it had become. But here's the prediction. The techniques survived. Every troll farm, every state-sponsored bot network, every coordinated inauthentic behavior campaign that platforms like Facebook and Twitter have identified in the last decade owes a structural debt to what the IRD built 70 years ago. The playbook didn't die. It was inherited. Before I go, here is your historical footnote of the day. In 1953, the CIA and MI6 jointly ran an operation called Operation Boot, known on the American side as Operation Ajax, to overthrow Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The weapon of choice wasn't tanks or assassins. It was newspapers. Intelligence agents paid Iranian journalists to publish fabricated stories, claiming Mossadegh was a communist sympathizer, creating a fake public consensus that justified a coup. The operation succeeded. Mossadegh fell. And the blowback from that single act of media manipulation, the installation of the Shah, the 1979 revolution, decades of hostility, is still shaping geopolitics today. One forged newspaper story. 70 years of consequences. That is your footnote for today. If you ever wondered why it feels like you can't trust what you read online, now you know. The template was drawn up by hand in a London office in 1948. Subscribe to Weird History. I cover this every single day. See you tomorrow.